Amid confusion and uncertainty, the Biden administration on Friday began implementing a sweeping policy shift at the U.S. Mexico border as a COVID-era order known as Title 42 that allowed the swift expulsion of many migrants expired, and new asylum restrictions took effect. Facing concerns that the end of a 3-year-old order could strain U.S. border facilities to the breaking point, U.S. officials were keeping a close eye on the movements of migrants that had already reached record numbers in recent days.
We got a robust plan in place to humanely manage the border through enforcement, deterrence, and diplomacy.
White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre defended the plan at a press briefing on Friday.
We've been very clear. We want a system that's humane, that's orderly. That's what the president said on the first day that he walked into this administration, putting forth a piece of legislation that is comprehensive.
Several last-minute court actions added to questions about how President Joe Biden's reworked border strategy will play out, with advocates filing a legal challenge to the new asylum regulation as it was enacted. Though a chaotic race to U.S. border ports of entry on Thursday appeared to have given way to relative calm on Friday, there was a sense of confusion among some migrants. Communities along the border have worried for weeks that they might be strained by newly arrived asylum seekers awaiting processing or immigration court dates. But Mayor Oscar Leeser of El Paso, Texas, says so far things have been fairly quiet.
We actually have had a very smooth transition as Title 42 has elapsed and we've gone to Title 8. And that really because we had a lot of preparation. We were ready, we were prepared. And, we were preparing for the unknown and we'll still continue to do that.
Meanwhile, Venezuelan migrant Juan Pavon, currently in Mexico heeding the Biden administration's calls to request asylum via the mobile app CBP One, spoke to Reuters about the urgency of the moment.
That is the result of the desperation in which migrants live, the result of the situation of vulnerability that we have, where we arrive here and we want to leave this country quickly because our lives are in danger and we have many fears. And so what we see is kind of an immediate solution.
Advocates argue the new regulation, put in place by Biden's Democratic administration to curb illegal crossings, resembles restrictions imposed by his Republican predecessor Donald Trump that they had successfully blocked in court. Tens of thousands of migrants this week waded through rivers and climbed walls and embankments onto U.S. territory. According to the National Border Patrol Council, around 25,000 migrants were being held in U.S. Customs and Border Protection facilities near the border on Friday, down slightly from record highs earlier in the week.
Daniel, what do you have to say about the charges?
A former U.S. Marine who killed a homeless man by putting him in a chokehold on the New York City subway was arraigned on a manslaughter charge in Manhattan criminal court on Friday after surrendering to police. A viral video showed Daniel Penny putting 30-year-old Jordan Neely in a chokehold for more than 3 minutes on May 1st while they rode on an F train in Manhattan. 2 other men are seen restraining Neely's arms before he went limp. The medical examiner said Neely died from a compression of the neck. Penny's lawyers said their client did not mean to kill him.
Don't attack. Don't choke. Don't kill. Don't take someone's life.
Neely family attorney Dante Mills on Friday disputed claims that Neely had threatened other passengers.
So should Daniel Penny be charged with manslaughter? Absolutely. Because he acted with indifference. He didn't care about Jordan, he cared about himself. And we can't let that stand.
According to witnesses, Neely, a Michael Jackson impersonator in the subway system, was complaining loudly about being hungry and saying he was ready to die when Penny came up behind him and gripped him around the neck. The 24-year-old restrained him on the floor until Neely appeared to stop moving. He was later declared dead. In a statement from his legal team, Penny expressed condolences to those close to Mr. Neely and alleged that Neely had aggressively threatened passengers riding in the subway car. Penny was arraigned on 1 count of second-degree manslaughter, according to Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg.
Justice for Jordan!
A bystander video of Neely's death drew national attention and revived a debate among New Yorkers about crime in the subway and what to do with the growing number of homeless people in the city.
But we need accountability.
The killing and a perception that prosecutors wavered in charging Penny sparked protests, with some saying the incident amounted to a lynching and an example of white vigilantism against people of color. Neely was black and Penny is white. The judge set Penny's bond at $100,000. He is due back in court in July.
A quarrel over the affiliation of the village church. Voices are raised and it ends in tears. The parish in Kyiv in western Ukraine belongs to the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, or UOC, which Kyiv says is under the influence of Moscow. Russia kills us, rapes us, this woman says. It's also about the language. We must pray in Ukrainian, she says. The UOC uses Church Slavonic, an archaic religious language with similarities to Russian. Most here want to switch to a new church backed by the government, as hundreds of other communities have voted to do since Russia invaded. But not everyone wants that. This is no time to quarrel, another woman says. Reuters visited 2 villages in late April in the region of Vinnytsia. Dozens of residents spoke of a deep rift in their communities. In neighbouring Rabivtsi, parishioners voted in March for their 300-year-old church to switch to the Kyiv-backed and similarly named Orthodox Church of Ukraine. Towns and villages across Ukraine have held such votes. Serhiy Fretsyuk is the local librarian.
I think it's right that we switched because Russia is the aggressor, and it will forever remain the aggressor. Ties with them must be severed.
Ukrainian authorities have cracked down on the UOC since Russia's invasion. More than 60 criminal cases have been opened against its clergy, many accused of collaboration and spreading pro-Russian propaganda. A legal battle is also raging to evict the church from its historic monastery headquarters in Kyiv, one of the holiest sites in the Orthodox Church. Authorities are encouraging people to sever all ties with Russia, but there are deep-rooted relationships that go back centuries. Olga Hrebenyuk sings in the choir.
There is no reason to be sad. The others will realize later and make the switch. It's difficult for them because we got used to saying in Church Slavonic, but now we need to switch. For some it's hard, for others it's easier. There's a barrier, like when a man goes to another woman. There's something not quite right.
The UOC denies being allied to Moscow and says it has seen no evidence of wrongdoing by its clergy. Many of its believers are patriots fighting Russian forces, it says. Despite that, polls show Ukrainians turning their back on the church in droves.
This is a Russian cargo ship which docked in South Africa late last year. And according to the US envoy to South Africa, it was there to pick up weapons. Ruben Brigitte told a media briefing on Thursday that he was confident the Lady R had been loaded with weapons and ammunition before it made its way back to Russia. It's a possible breach of Pretoria's declared neutrality in the Ukraine conflict.
That there should be mediation.
Brigitte called it fundamentally unacceptable and not the actions of a non-aligned country. And here's State Department spokesperson Vedant Patel.
The U.S. has serious concerns about the docking of a sanctioned Russian cargo vessel at a South African naval port in December of last year.
The Office of South African President Cyril Ramaphosa said an independent inquiry was being opened into the allegation.
Can you confirm?
Responding to a question from the opposition on Thursday, Ramaphosa did not confirm or deny the shipment took place.
And that whole matter, Honourable Steenhuisen, is being looked into.
South Africa has close historic ties to Russia due to Moscow's support for the anti-apartheid struggle. Last year, it conducted joint naval exercises with Russia and China, which it called routine. South Africa's presidency said that the issue of the suspected arms shipment had already been discussed with US officials who had agreed to let an investigation run its course. No evidence, it added, had yet been provided by Washington. Nevertheless, there is already an economic impact. The South African rand struck a fresh all-time low against the dollar in early trading on Friday. That's partly due to South Africa's worst power cuts on record, but also as currency traders said they were worried the country could now face Western sanctions.
He's dominated politics in Turkey for 2 decades. Now Tayyip Erdogan is putting his rule on the line as he faces opposition challenger Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu in Turkey's landmark elections on Sunday. Polls currently suggest Kılıçdaroğlu has an edge, but that Erdogan could yet prevail given his strong support base and his devout working-class heartlands. Those who followed Erdogan's rise over the last 3 decades argue he'll fight by all means to retain power, and that he could use state resources to his benefit to snatch a slim victory or to contest any narrow defeat. European Union and NATO members will also be watching the election closely. Relations between Erdogan and the EU have become strained in recent years, and leading members of NATO have expressed alarm at Erdogan's close relations with Russian President Vladimir Putin, concerned that Turkey is being used to circumvent sanctions on Moscow over its war in Ukraine. In a Reuters interview on Friday, Kılıçdaroğlu accused Russia of interference in the election, claiming his party has concrete evidence of Russia's responsibility for the release of deep-fake online content. The Kremlin said on Friday that allegations Russia had meddled in the upcoming Turkish presidential election were false and had been concocted by liars. At home, Turks have been battered by crippling inflation, a collapsing lira and a sharp decline in living standards in recent years. Problems compounded by February's devastating earthquake that killed thousands and left millions homeless. Erdogan has sought to sway voters by promoting big infrastructure and construction projects, showcasing Turkey's industrial milestones and warning of chaos in government in the event of an opposition win. His rival Kılıçdaroğlu is targeting voters disillusioned by Erdogan's rhetoric and perceived economic mismanagement, promising prosperity and greater respect for human rights and rule of law. If no one secures more than half the votes in the first round, a May 28 runoff will be held between the 2 leading candidates.